going to tie a fly formerly known as Prince. So I'm starting off with a size 14 nymph hook with a 3/32 tungsten bead, and I'm going to add some additional weight. So I'm just going to take my lead and make maybe 8 to 10 wraps, and I'll push it up into the bead head, and then I'll just smooth out that end section. The thread that I'm going to use is an A-dot, and this is a red, and so I'm just going to get that started behind the lead. I'll take a couple of wraps up through the lead itself and then break off the extra. Now I'm going to put a tag into this, so I'm going to take my wraps down below the bend so that part will stick out, and then I'm going to bring it up and put just a little thread ball at the start of the bend of the hook, and that's so my goose biots are going to spread out a little bit better. The biots that I'm going to use for this, I'm going to use just a light kind of tan color, and I'll just take 2 of those. And I always like, when I am tying in biot tails, to get real meaty sections so that they have some shape to them. So I've got 2 of them there. Again, when you take them off, they're going to want to lay the same way. So I just put them back to back, and then that'll give you that V shape that you're looking for. I'm going to measure it out to be about the length of the hook shank, and you can tie these in 1 at a time or 2 at a time, and just putting them on either side of that thread, and then start to make my wraps. You can see how that will keep them open. And then at this point, after a couple of turns, you can start to adjust your tails however you want them. And then I'll just come back through and trim those off. Careful not to snip your thread while you're doing it. Alright, with my tails in, I'm going to bring the thread back to behind the lead. Now I'm going to tie in my rib material. And for this, you can use your favorite kind of gold rib material. This is just a flat gold tinsel, and it's a smaller size than what I normally tie when I'm tying in a regular Prince nymph. And so I'll just get that tied in there, and again bring it up to just behind that lead. Now the body for this is peacock herl, and so I'm going to take maybe 3 strands of herl, and I'll clip the end so that I have a good tie-in point. And I'll just get that started in and wrap back down, and then I can advance my thread all the way up to the bead. So now if I'm looking at the front of the fly, I'm going to tie this in a counterclockwise motion, and I'm just going to wrap that all the way up to the bead, and then I can tie that off. Notice I advance the peacock herl beyond my thread, and that makes it easier when you're doing these kind of counterclockwise wraps. It makes it easier to tie in the material when it gets to the top. Now I can get that good cross section with my tinsel, so I'm just going to now wrap clockwise wraps up through and bring that up to behind my bead, and then I can trim that. So the leg material that I'm going to use is a partridge, and this is a brown partridge, and I'm just going to clean off the bottom portion of that, and then I'm going to take everything back. I'm going to tie this in just like I would if it was a wet fly. So I'm going to pull everything back away from the tip, and then I'll tie it in by the tip. So I'll do a wrap or two on top and underneath, and then I can come back through and trim the tip of that. And with these smaller ones, I'm going to use just a hackle plier here, clip on the stem. I'm going to wet these fibers back on top of one another, and it's just going to take one turn to get me all the way around, and then I can just remove that, take two wraps, clean off my stem here, and I'm going to pull these all underneath because I'm going to lay my wings on top. So to this point it's looked relatively comparable to a traditional Prince nymph. Now I'm going to take some medium silver tinsel, and I'm just going to cut off a strand of it, and I'm going to cut this into two angled sections. And so essentially what you're doing is you're replacing the top goose baiats with these angled sections. So if you take one cut, it'll split those into two angled pieces, and now you can tie them on. So I'll take my first and just place it right on top, run it about the length of the body of the fly, and you can pull them apart, and then I'll take the second piece, and again, when you have your light wraps in, you can start to mess with the positioning of the wings. So once I'm happy with that, then I can come back through and just trim off that excess. And now I can make my whip finishes here. And then just to finish off the fly, I'm going to take a drop of head cement over the threads. And you can see how that looks then there from the top, from the side and underneath. And that is the formerly known as Prince.